Well, welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee this Wednesday the 19th of June. I'm Councillor Tony Gillis, the chair of this committee, and a special welcome to the new councillors. Welcome. The meeting is being web streamed to the public through the council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, when asked to speak, please use the push to talk button on the microphone in front of you. This will allow the camera to pan in your general direction and everyone to hear you. Before we begin the formal agenda, I am obliged to read out the following fire notice. There is no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask that you make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the Town Hall and congregate at the entrance to Caldegot Park. An officer of the council will give instructions on when it is safe to return to the building. Moving on to the agenda, to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of April and the 5th of June. I know that some of them attended that meeting. I'll move from the chair. That's a true record. All those in favour? Okay, thank you for that. Second is to receive any apologies. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Harrington, Howling and Caradia, and their substitutes this evening respectively are Councillors Robinson, Hassel and Claire Edwards.
Thank you. Move on to declarations of interest. Receive declarations of interest as defined by the Councillors' Code of Conduct for Councillors. And I'll start off with a non-pecuniary interest as being the Ward Councillor for Coombe Fields. Application number R24/0185. Any other non-pecuniaries? Councillor Robinson.
Hello, yeah, non-pecuniary interest is the portfolio holder for growth and investment.
Thank you for that. Any pecuniary interest?
I'm non-pecuniary. I am the councillor for Avondale, the first item on the agenda, the ward councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Hassel. Any pecuniary interests? No. And then we'll move on then to notice under Section 106, Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax. So I hope we're all clear on that one. Yes, indeed we are. I'm just going to read out the rules for the speaking before we move on to items for consideration. The planning officer will speak first and present the application. The committee will be asked if they have any points of clarification from the officer. The representatives for the objectors, the applicants and then the ward councillor will each be invited to speak. The planning officer can address any material issues arising from the speaker's comments and accept questions from councillors. Any ward councillor or councillor who speaks on an application as part of the public speaking process shall leave the meeting once all speakers have completed their presentations relating to it. The committee will then go into debate on the application, asking relevant questions of the planning officer if necessary. A formal recommendation will be made and voted upon. So the rules for public speaking: speakers will have 3 minutes to make their presentation. They will be warned by a short alarm when they have 30 seconds left, and then further alarm will sound when their time has expired. Their presentation should then be brought to a halt. No extra time will be allowed. All speakers should direct their presentations to amplifying the planning matters that they have previously put to us for the benefit of the committee. Speakers should restrict their comments to material considerations only. Any non-planning issues will be disregarded. Speakers should not introduce any additional information that has not been previously brought to the planning authority's attention, i.e. introduce late items that have not been suitably considered by officers or properly addressed in the officer's report to the committee for councillors' deliberation. No visual aids or handouts may be used, and no questions to officers or councillors will be allowed. No members of the public are allowed to take part in the debate once the presentation has been given. Now we move on to items for consideration. There has been a change in order because we have got public speakers, so the first one will be item number 5. And number 2 will stop as number 2, and item number 1 will then move down into 3rd position. So we start off with Sam, and this is regards Sparrow Hall Barn, Coombe Fields.
Good evening. This is application R240185 at Sparrow Hall Barn, Coombe Fields. The application is for a retrospective application to retain a single-storey side extension to an existing outbuilding, and you can see the extension under consideration in the photo on the right. So this application was called to be determined by a planning committee by Councillor Timms during the 21-day statutory consultation period. So in terms of the site location and characteristics, Sparrow Hall Barn is located within the West Midlands Greenbelt and outside of any defined settlement boundary. It forms a small cluster of buildings comprising residential properties, a hotel and a pub/restaurant. Open fields are sited to the rear and southern side of the building. Further to the south is Anstey Park. The property is also accessed via a long private access road directly off Coombefield Road. Sparrow Hall Barn itself was a former agricultural building which is now being converted into a residential property many years ago. Within the residential curtilage of the Sparrow Hall Barn is an outbuilding and a small side extension attached. The extension which is attached is what is under consideration in this application tonight. So in terms of the existing building which the extension is attached to, the outbuilding was erected under the premise of being incidental use associated with Sparrow Hall Barn and was therefore lawful under the relevant tolerances of the General Permitted Development Order. I don't know why my presentations. The photographs of it, the photos have moved over the text. I don't know why. No, it's fine. The outbuilding is of brick and tile construction and single storey throughout, as you can see from the photo on the right hand side. It has a 10 metre width and a 6 metre depth and has a total height of 4 metres. However, there were various changes to its previous use which rendered the building unlawful. A planning application was submitted to the LPA to regularise a previous unlawful use. This was to convert the outbuilding to a holiday lets and for a small side extension. This application was refused and later dismissed at appeal. Following the refusal of this application, an enforcement site visit took place which confirmed that the building had been reverted back to its incidental use. So in terms of the proposal details, as I mentioned, the proposal under consideration tonight is a retrospective application to retain the single-storey side extension attached to the main outbuilding, as shown in the photograph at the bottom. The side extension is not classed as permitted development unlike the main outbuilding and therefore requires planning permission. The side extension itself has a length of 2.65 metres, a width of 1.5 metres and an overall height of 2.5 metres to a flat pitch roof. And it comprises of matching brickwork to the main outbuilding it's attached to. So these are the site photos. On the top left we have the access road from Coombefield Road. Next to that, as I've already showed you, the side extension which is under consideration, and then the remainder of the photos is the existing currently lawful outbuilding which the extension is attached to. So in terms of the consultation responses, Environmental Health offered no comments to the scheme, Ecology had no objection, Highways had no objection. Councillor Heather Timms objected, concerns raised that this constitutes inappropriate development within the Greenbelt. And Coombefields Parish Council also objected, and they said this extension is attached to an outbuilding which has been refused permission for the use as an independent accommodation holiday lets. So when assessing the principle of development for this extension, Policy GP2 of the local plan states that development will be allocated and supported in accordance with the settlement hierarchy. The application site, as previously mentioned, is located upon Greenbelt land, and as such, new development will usually be resisted. Only where national policy allows will development be permitted. Under paragraph 153 of the MPPF, it states that we're considering any planning application, local planning authorities should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the Greenbelt. Paragraph 154 and 155 outline a list of exceptions whereby Greenbelt development can be considered acceptable. In the case of this application for the side extension, paragraph 154C is considered applicable. This paragraph states that the extension or alteration of a building is acceptable provided that it does not result in a disproportionate additions over and above the size of the original building. The extension, as you've seen, is modest in size. As the remainder of the outbuilding is already present, the extension is substantially smaller than the outbuilding, and therefore the extension, due to its size, will be subordinate to the outbuilding and is not considered a disproportionate addition. So, as I mentioned previously, an application was refused to change the use to a holiday let and included this side extension in this application now. This was dismissed at appeal. However, the extension within this assessment now was included in that appeal decision. As I mentioned, the appeal was dismissed. However, it is important to note the assessment of the extension in terms of the Greenbelt impact. The inspector concluded that the extension is very modest in size, particularly in comparison with the rest of the building. As such, it is not considered a disproportionate addition and therefore consequently falls under exception under paragraph 149C, now 154 of the framework. The inspector also went on to say, in conclusion, the proposal as a whole would not include inappropriate development within the Greenbelt. In these regards, it would accord with policy, local plan policy GP2 and be acceptable under the terms of the framework's Greenbelt policy. Therefore, on balance, when assessing the impact on the openness of the Greenbelt that this extension provides, that above which the existing outbuilding already causes is limited, and therefore the extension on its own merits would not have a detrimental impact on the openness of the vicinity in this aspect. Therefore, the proposal is considered to comply with paragraph 154C of the NPPF, and therefore the principle is established under local plan policy GP2. So in terms of character and design, local plan policy SDC1 states that development will only be supported where the proposals are of scale, density and design that responds to the character of the areas in which they are situated. As I mentioned to you previously, the extension only reached a height of 2.45 metres and a total floor area of 3.85 metres squared. The external appearance uses matching brickwork to the remainder of the building, and the size and nature of the extension is also subservient to the main outbuilding. In terms of its impact on the amenity, policy SDC1 of the local plan states that proposals for new development will ensure that living conditions of existing and future neighbouring occupiers are safeguarded. Due to the nature of the development by way of its size, massing and location away from the neighbouring occupiers, the proposal will have no impact on the amenity of the surrounding area and would not cause any additional loss of light, overbearing impact or privacy implications on the neighbouring properties that already exist from the existing outbuilding it's attached to. Therefore, on this aspect, the application is in accordance with local plan policy SDC1. So in terms of other matters, the proposal poses no impact on the current access or parking situation on the site, and the development is also located circa 150 metres from Coomfields Road. On this basis, the Highways Authority have no objection to the scheme. Ecology were also consulted on the application and provided a stance of no objection. This application is therefore in accordance with local plan policy NE1. So the planning balance in conclusion, the proposal respects the scale and character of the surrounding area, does not adversely affect the amenities of the occupiers of neighbouring properties to an acceptable level. There is no impact on highway safety or biodiversity. It complies with paragraph 154C of the NPPF, and the level of harm to the Greenbelt above that which is posed by the existing outbuilding is limited. A precedence was also made from the previous appeal decision on the site, which confirms that the extension on its own merits will not impact unacceptably on the Greenbelt. Therefore, the recommendation is that the application is approved, subject to conditions and informatives as set out in the draft decision notice, and the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment be given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the conditions and informatives as outlined in the draft decision notice. Thank you.
Any points of clarification to the officer? All okay on that? Okay, we'll move on to the speaker. The speaker is David Parnell from Coomfields, and those of you that have seen on page 55 of the report, it does look as though officers in the planning department have been kept quite busy on this particular site. So over to you, Mr. Parnell. You've got 3 minutes.
Good evening, councillors. For my sins, I'm the correspondence councillor, clerk in other words, untrained and unpaid for Coomfields Parish Council. We've objected to this application for the retention of a single-storey side extension. 1, this application is an extension to a building that has already been refused planning permission as a residential accommodation. As Tony says, it has history. 2, the building and extension have been refused planning permission as holiday lets, as Sam indicated. And the previous reasons for the refusal of planning permission and appeals still apply. This, number 4, this extension is in the green belt, and RBC have been lax in not stopping the plans and permission when the opportunity was there. 5, this planning application has only come about due to a visit of a planning officer on the 8th of February this year. There have been also, it has brought worry and stress to the immediate neighbours on a long-term basis, and has been outlined earlier. This was originally proposed as a garage facing away from the neighbours. Apparently the doors, the bifold doors are facing habitation. And just as a final item, a septic tank was installed, which we believe is without permission, which has also been giving concern. Okay?
That concludes your talk. Okay, thanks. Can I get you to cancel your microphone? Thank you very much. Now, I'll turn into the officer now. Has he raised any points that haven't been addressed in your...
I don't believe so, no.
No? Is that okay?
Yep.
All right. Have you, from the speaker, have any of the council have raised any concern that we can address through the officer? Or are you happy so far? Okay. In that case, then we'll move on to the ward councillor, Councillor Garcia, who's got 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. For those of you that don't know, I'm the ward councillor for the Revel and Binley Woods, which encompasses Coombe Fields. And I'm here today to represent the local residents who've expressed many concerns about the planning history of this development. The appeal decision which refused this development for holiday lets, and about the retrospective application in this extension. The inspector in his report said, "For clarity reasons, I confirm that my assessment relates solely to whether planning permission should be granted for the proposed change of use of the building and the construction of an extension as shown on the plans." So his decision was not based on the building themselves. His conclusion was that it should not be granted for a change of use. The report of your officer then uses a decision comment relating to change of use in order to purport that because of the size of the extension, it's an exception under the NPPF. This is an extension built without permission in the Greenbelt, where development should be refused unless exceptional circumstances apply. Actually, in my opinion, this building should have been stopped long before it reached its completion. And apparently it was only noticed recently, and that's why it's come to planning. The extension was built without the planning permission and is now in front of you as a retrospective application. If granted, this will set a precedent that in Rugby Borough you're allowed to just build small extensions to buildings in the green belt without permission, and it will rely on reporting to enforcement to ensure that proper procedures have been followed. I ask that you refuse this application in order to make sure that a precedent is not set. Many thanks.
Thank you. Now, councillors, are there any points raised by the councillor there as regards clarification through the officer, or you?
If the officer could just clarify some of the statements that were made in those representations.
Yeah, through you, Chair. What I'll try and do, I mentioned it in the report, in the presentation, but I'll clarify sort of the history of the building. So the building itself, the outbuilding, is located within the residential curtilage of Sparrow Hall Barn, and as such there's permitted development rights which the homeowner benefits from. So this was built under Class E as an outbuilding, which should be incidental to the main property. That's how it was originally built, and it was considered lawful at the time. However, as mentioned, the use of the building was changed unlawfully to holiday lets, which we were then informed about through an enforcement case. Subsequently, they submitted an application to us to regularise this, along with the small side extension they built, which is under consideration tonight. That was refused by us, the holiday lets and the extension, which later then went to appeal and was later dismissed as well. However, as I mentioned, the side extension was assessed by the inspectorate in terms of the greenbelt impact, and it was considered to be acceptable or not have an undue impact on the greenbelt's openness. As a result of this appeal being dismissed, the holiday let use was then unlawful. So it's now, as of February this year, an enforcement site visit was carried out which confirmed that the use had been reverted back to an incidental outbuilding. So as far as we're aware, the outbuilding is lawful, and the only thing that needs permission now is this side extension, which is under consideration tonight.
Any further questions to the officer, or do you want to move on to the debate? Okay, it sounds like we're going to move on to the debate, so I'm going to ask Councillor Garcia if she'd kindly leave the room. Thank you very much. Mr Parnell, you can stop and listen to the debate. It's only the council, the ward council, that has to leave. Okay, then we'll move on to the debate. Who wants to kick things off?
Just to ensure that we can move on from this item, can I move the recommendation as printed? Clearly, I feel that the site would be better controlled with conditions than have a never-ending soar and disagreements within the local community. So can I move that we support the officer's recommendation on this application?
Okay, have we got any further speakers? Councillor Sanderson is actually referring to condition 4 on the report, which makes sure it is incidental to the property and is not used for anything else other than that. Would the legal officer like to confirm that that is the case?
Yeah, I mean the condition provides for that, and actually material change of use would require planning permission anyway. So yeah, that's the position.
Okay, we need some other speakers, I'm afraid, otherwise we're not going to get very far. Councillor Lawrence, will you look as though you're on the edge of saying something? Councillor Silvers has to go.
I just second the proposal by Councillor.
Who seconded it?
Yeah, seconding it.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay. Any further speakers? So it has been moved. Councillor Maudis.
Just to raise that I'm a little bit torn on this one, Chair. And I think it's probably worthy of a little bit of debate because it has a direct impact on the residents. So I just don't want to agree just because we're not talking. I think these things need to be discussed. How is the building used? Do we know that? Is it incidental to the property in what respect? There's a septic tank there. Is that was mentioned? That was muted. Does that need planning, for example?
Through you, Chair. So I have a note here from the enforcement officer who carried out the site visit, and it was confirmed firsthand that the building was being used for incidental residential storage at the time of the visit. All the plumbing and kitchen fittings had been physically uninstalled, and so the building would require significant modification to make it habitable again, and that was our latest stance on it. In terms of the septic tank, I was unaware of this. I mean, that would be a separate enforcement situation, separate from this application as such. So if that is a genuine concern, then that will be looked into by the enforcement team following any decision for this.
So mainly used for storage?
Yes, yeah. as of the last site visit by the enforcement officer. Obviously,
I
we
just
can't...
wonder why it would need a porch then, is my question, which is ultimately what we're discussing.
Yeah, I mean, I can only assess the application that's put in front of me. If they want to build this structure, I assume originally it was a porch for the holiday let, which is obviously now unlawful. In terms of what he will use it for moving forward, whether it's just an access and entrance into his storage building, I don't know, but obviously I can only assess what's put in front of me, and obviously, as you've seen on the photos, that is the existing nature and what was built.
Councillor Modis.
Thank you, Chair. In that case, then, I genuinely, it's in the green belt. It doesn't have special circumstances as far as I'm concerned. So I'm happy to go against the officer's report. While it was a good report, thank you very much, and I can see both sides, but for me, it's in the green belt, and there's no special circumstances there, so I'm, thank you.
Does anybody wish to second that?
Yes, I mean, we are talking about inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. Whilst the development is small in nature, it is unneeded. It is not a requirement of the building itself to function as basically a storage place. In fact, it actually may prevent it being functioning as well as it could do, in terms of having better access into it. So I think there is no need for it. It appears to be inappropriate development. So yes, I would second the refusal.
Yeah, just through you, Chair, just for a point of clarification, the officer's view obviously is it's not inappropriate development in the Greenbelt because it's not a disproportionate extension to the existing building. So you're free to make up your own minds on whether it's disproportionate or not, but that's the recommendation in the report.
Okay, have we got any further speakers? Okay, so we've got a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Edwards.
Sympathetic to what the residents have said and Councillor Garcia, but on a balance, I think that given the recommendation and given that the distance between the building and other neighbouring properties, there is a reasonable distance, I think on that basis I will be in favour of the recommendation.
Okay, thanks for those comments. So we've got a mover and a seconder for approval. All those in favour of approval, please show. And all those against, please show. Is that it, all of us? Okay, that's 3 against, so that's approved. Okay, so it's 7 for and 3 against, so that is actually approved. Thank you. Of course, it is approved with the condition. The important condition is condition number 4, and we hope that when the officers are out looking around other areas, they maybe call in and have a look and make sure it is actually still being used as stated in the report. Thank you for that. We'll move on to the second item on the agenda. We've got speakers again, and this one is Callum, and this is 57 Bridget Street. It's one of our favourite ones.
Thank you, Chair. So this is application R240014, 57 Bridget Street. This is an application for a change of use of an existing C3 dwelling house to an 8-bedroom sui generis HMO with the erection of a rear dormer and single-storey rear extension. This application has been brought into committee as it's been called in by Councillor Slinger for parking concerns. So the application is located in New Bilton, which is within the Rugby urban area. The site is approximately 500 metres from the town centre and approximately 1.1 miles from the train station. The application dwelling is currently a two-storey, four-bedroom property located on Bridget Street. The surrounding properties on Bridget Street are generally formed in a linear arrangement and of a similar era to that of the application dwelling, with bay windows common and a range of finishes present in the street scene. The property is subject to on-street parking. So here you can see the existing dwelling. It's constructed out of red brick and has slate roof tiles. There's a private access between the dwelling and number 5 Bridget Street, which allows access to the rear private amenity space. Currently, it has 4 bedrooms and the rear amenity space is paved. There's no recent planning history for the application site either. So the proposal details. The main part of this is the change of use from a C3 dwelling house to a sui generis HMO, but also included is the rear extension that would project 3 metres from the rear and have a width of 3.375 metres. There's a rear dormer included in this application that would have an L shape that would be slightly larger than what would be allowed under a PD, a householder PD. Bike storage is also being proposed that would be located at the very rear of the amenity space. It would have a width of 4 metres and a length of 3 metres. There would be a number of internal alterations to the property that would not require planning permission. This would include alterations inside to increase the number of bedrooms from 4 to 8. The materials used in the design process would be similar in appearance to the existing dwelling. So hopefully you can see these plans all right. The main sections that you want to have a look at are just here. We've got a rear extension. This could be done under householder PD, so it's less of a concern. And then moving on, you can see the dormer roof here. So you can see the outline there. It's a bit easier to see on the elevations, as you'll see here. So these are the existing along the top and then the proposed elevations along the bottom. So once again, you can see the rear elevation here with the rear extension as well as the rear dormer. So you can kind of see the dormer along here. It projects above part of the roof here, so you can see that here, but it's lesser in height than the main dwelling house, the tallest roof of the main dwelling house. So in terms of consultation response, there was responses from Environmental Health, who gave no objection subject to a condition, Ecology, who had no objection, Warwickshire County Council Highways, who had no objection subject to a condition, Work Services, who had no objection, and then the application was requested to be called into committee by Councillor Slinger. In terms of neighbour consultation, there was 2 objections raised, and they were concerns with highway safety and too many HMOs being in the surrounding area. In terms of the main considerations for this application, the principle of development, the site is located within Rugby Town, which is the most sustainable location. As such, development will be permitted within existing boundaries. With the design of it, as stated previously, the dormer would be relatively large. It would exceed the volume of roof alteration that could be done under householder permitted development. That's because it would have a cubic volume of 53 metres compared to the 40 that's allowed under householder applications. The extension to the rear would be relatively minor and could be done under PD. On top of that, the bike storage could also be done under PD. It's unlikely that any of these developments would be visible from the street scene, therefore it's unlikely that they would have a detrimental impact upon the street scene. In terms of neighbouring properties, The works wouldn't create further overshadowing or overlooking. Condition 4 has been recommended to ensure the windows on the east elevation are obscure glazed. That will ensure no overlooking into number 55 Bridget Street. Environmental Health have raised no concerns in regard to noise at the dwelling, although it has been noted that other licences would be required for the HMO if planning permission were to be approved. In terms of highway safety and parking, the proposal would result in the property having 8 bedrooms. The standards within the local plan state that each HMO will be considered on its own merits. The application dwelling is located in a highly sustainable location within the town centre, and with the town centre being 500 metres away and the train station 1.1 miles away in close proximity. Additionally, there are a number of bus stops in the vicinity, such as on Oliver Street. On 2 separate site visits to the property on Wednesday the 10th and Thursday the 11th of April 2024 between half past midnight and 5:30 in the morning, the average number of parking spaces available within 200 metres was 7.5. Although this is slightly below the maximum occupants, it is unlikely that all occupants will own a car. The property could be converted to a 6-occupant HMO without planning permission, and the potential additional demand for parking generated by 2 extra occupants will not be significant. Cycle storage has been included with the proposal to ensure sufficient covered and secure storage is provided on site. Warwickshire County Council Highways have raised no objection to the application, subject to conditions and informatives. In terms of ecology, a bat report was done, and it was determined that it was negligible impact upon nesting bats and birds. It was noted that although there may be, it's unlikely that it would impact bats in the short term, to be aware of potential bat presence in the future. In terms of air quality, the application site is within the AQMA and would generate new floor space of an alternative use. So Environmental Health have recommended a condition to be attached to the decision outlining mitigation measures to meet air quality neutral standards. In terms of HMOs in the area, there are currently 7 licensed HMOs on Bridget Street, with 1 located at number 53 and 1 also located at number 55. There are 133 separate addresses on Bridget Street, currently resulting in approximately 5.26% of the street being HMOs. 1 additional HMO would result in 6.01% of the street being a registered HMO. Over to planning, balance and conclusion. The site is located within the most sustainable location within the borough and has the most access to a range of services and facilities. Externally, the extension, rear dormer and cycle shed would not be visible from the street scene and therefore would not have a negative impact upon the street scene. The proposals would have little impact on the amenities of adjoining properties, and it's unlikely that it would have a detrimental impact on the highway safety or protected species. On balance, it's concluded that the proposal constitutes sustainable development. It complies with the development plan, and there are no material considerations that indicate that the proposal should be refused. In accordance with Section 38 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, and having regard to material considerations including the framework, it is considered that the planning application should be approved. The recommendation is that planning application R24/0014 be approved subject to the conditions and informatives set out in the draft decision notice appended to this report, and the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment be given the delegated authority to make minor amendments to the conditions and informatives outlined in the draft decision notice.
Have we got any points of clarification to ask Callum? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much for your report. Yeah, just a question on the number of bedrooms. So in some parts in the report, when you were speaking, I think I saw it was referred to as 4-bedroom and then 8-bedroom. I think I know the answer, but I want to clarify. Are we talking about a 4-bedroom property of double rooms with 8 berth capacity, or are we talking about an 8-bedroomed property with, up to 16 people? Do you see where I'm coming from? Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So it would be an 8-bedroom property. There's a condition 6, limits the dwelling to a maximum occupancy of 8. So it's 8 single bedrooms. Originally currently it's 4 bedrooms.
Councillor Sevastova.
Thank you, Chair. You said highway authority have no objection. Is it based on some kind of a survey on the parking?
Yeah, so through you, Chair. Yes, there was a highway survey conducted on the Wednesday, the 10th of April, and then Thursday, the 11th of April. They did a parking survey, so they went out, analysed the parking. It was between 12:30 at night and 5:30 in the morning. They chose during term time so that it was most likely to have the most people on the street parked, and they'd initially objected to it, but after that was submitted, they'd raised no objection to the application.
Councillor Robertson again.
Just through Chair, I would like to ask a question about one of the conditions. Is that for now, or should I save that for later? It's a clarification on a condition.
Probably leave that till later. Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you. Right, then in that case, then we'll move on to our speakers. And Councillor Slinger, Ward Councillor. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many people in the community that I represent of New Bilton have made it clear to me that they do not want to see so many HMOs converted in the ward. They've expressed this in a petition carried out 2 years ago and one led by the community more recently, both of which encouraged the previous council administration to begin to take action. Now, the community is not against HMOs per se, and nor am I. We are against the over-concentration of HMOs in certain streets, and residents have told me that they're concerned that the nature of their community is changing in front of their eyes without their consent, and that this impacts their neighbourhood, for example, and specifically as regards parking. And this application is another example of this. I have every respect for officers who, in providing their expert guidance, are fulfilling their duty as per the prevailing legislation and the local plan. But it's regrettable that residents' concerns are often deemed in planning law, as immaterial in planning terms. I'd just like to focus on a couple of points about this application, all of which ultimately relate to parking. First, reference to public transport as making this a more sustainable application. 1.1 miles from a train station is not, in my view, near, and it's unlikely that people would walk to the station frequently. Second, the reference to a cycle store. Rugby is sadly not the hub of sustainable transport that the proliferation of cycle stores in HMOs would imply. Thirdly, the density of HMOs in the area. A resident has pointed out to me that if this application were to be approved, it would mean 3 HMOs in adjoining properties, number 53 with 10 occupants, 55 with 6, and now number 57 with 8 occupants. But as the officer's report points out, there are 52 potential occupants in 7 licensed HMOs, with an additional 8 to follow if this is approved, meaning 60. And that's not including partners of occupants. Now, this is rather more than the 24 adults that we could perhaps reasonably imagine would have lived in 8 terraced properties if we assume 3 adults per property. That's a lot more people who may need to drive and therefore to park. And finally, Chair, regarding the parking survey, the resident mentioned that the surveys were carried out on 2 weeknights between midnight and 5:30 in the morning. Surely it's the case that if the survey had been carried out between 5:30 and 9, when most shift workers are at home, the picture would have shown far fewer spaces available. So I respectfully request that the committee considers deferring this application pending a more appropriate parking survey that ensures that shift work patterns are properly considered.
Thank you. Does Callum want to come back on any of those points raised?
Just through you, Chair, just one point in relation to the timings of that. There is a standard for the parking surveys, and this is the standard that they've followed, which is why that they've done it at that time, just to clarify that.
Have members got any points of clarification raised by Councillor Stringer? Councillor Freeman.
Do officers have any data on the number of vehicles that is attempting to park per HMO?
Through you, Chair. We don't have any data, unfortunately. It's not something that we have available to us, unfortunately. Sorry.
So potentially you've got 60 occupants with 60 vehicles across 10 HMOs.
Yeah, through you, Chair. In our obviously current local plan, we have parking standards, and HMOs don't have a specific standard in the current local plan with regard to parking. So normally, the smaller the unit, the less parking spaces will be actually required. So, for example, is less parking required for, say, a 2-bed flat compared to, say, a 3- or 4-bed house, potentially based on the number of occupants. So what we have to do is, because we don't have a parking standards for HMOs in the current local plan, we have to judge each case on its own merits. So on that basis, based on our dealings with HMOs and obviously being in a very urban location close to other sources of potential transport that people can access, and also having facilities or some facilities within walking distance, we are in the most sustainable part of the borough we can be. So on that basis, we have to make this judgment between the number of parking spaces that say an HMO would have in this location compared to somewhere else. Now also what we don't have data on and is how many properties have actual cars. Because obviously, you know, one person may move into a property, let's say a 2-bedroom property, and have 1 car, someone may move in and the occupants have 3 cars. All that we can do is, when we're granting planning permission, is make sure that a proportion of parking is available for those units. Obviously, with the nature of these types of HMOs, they tend to be in terraced housing, particularly Victorian Edwardian, where there is no parking, it is all on street, and that's why the parking surveys have had to be done to see what the parking availability is. I know in other parts of the town you do have residence parking areas and zones, but we don't have that in this part of Bridget Street and surrounding streets.
Okay, does that clarify your points there? Okay. So have you got any points, further clarification that Councillor Slinger's raised? No? In that case then, Councillor Slinger, thank you very much for attending. And let me have your 3 minutes. That's excellent. Thank you. Okay, then in that case then we'll move on to the debate. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. As the report says, it is a large 4-bedroom terrace property. It is in the most sustainable location. I was somewhat bemused by the comments that people wouldn't walk to the railway station from this address, since I lived in Victoria Street, a little further on, and did it 5 days a week for 10 years. So in terms of accessibility, it's not that far from the station. And there are bus routes on Oliver Street. There isn't, I think they've done as much as they can in terms of providing cycle provision. And I feel it is for double bedrooms to be converted into 8, and that was seen fair and reasonable, Chair. And therefore, I'll move the recommendation.
Have you got any further speakers? Councillor Moundis.
Could I ask Callum to put the street scene back up again, please? Yeah, I think you made a comment that the development wouldn't be seen from the street scene, but the dormer would be particularly prevalent on that to me. It is quite a big extension, that dormer, isn't it? Could we see that again, please?
So the dormer can be seen from the rear elevation, not the front elevation. Yeah. Okay, any further speakers? Councillor Robinson?
So I was just going to raise the point on the conditions. So there's the condition that, I forget which number it is now, but one of the conditions is about the development must start within 3 years. I'm assuming that's probably a standard. My concern about that is that it's clearly very marginal with the parking capacity being 7.5, and I understand the argument that how it's been framed in terms of why you don't think that's material at this moment in time, but within a couple of months, actually, it could be. So it just seems like a long time, 3 years, for a decision that actually, if it was made, if the application came forward in another 6 months or year, the answer might be different because of the rate at which HMOs are going in and the parking pressures. That was my question.
Yeah, just for clarification, as Councillor Robinson may see, with our conditions, we also list reasons why we've imposed a condition. And actually, in this particular case, it's what's actually enshrined in legislation. So when we grant planning permission for a full application, which this is for, the legislation says that we would allow an individual then be allowed 3 years to actually implement that. Experience of these types of applications is they tend to actually get implemented much quicker. And members will recall often we have retrospective ones that come to us because obviously sometimes the developers get ahead of themselves, but obviously in this case that's not the situation.
Councillor Srivastava.
Thank you, Chair. I know the area very well. The road is very narrow. The people who bought their properties long time ago with a vision that they're going to live in an area with family, neighborhood warranted, friendly. And the area is changing. And a lot of people are really, residents are worried about it, and some of them are leaving the area, which is very sad to me. Another thing, I think the survey on the parking, the time is questionable to me again. I don't know how many residents have been involved. It's very important, all this planning, that whatever is being development done, residents are not affected, and I think they are. I think there are some health and safety issues due to parking. It should be considered.
Okay, thanks for those comments. Something that I've learnt over the years, and that is the fact that the applicant can actually change it into 6 bedrooms without any permission. No conditions, no hours of control over working, nothing like that. But with the extra 2, we can impose all these extra conditions, all the informatives, working hours, construction hours, and parking, and all the rest of it. So I think this is probably the wiser route to go, and I'm going to second the approval. Councillor Lawrence.
Looking at this, I think we understand what we have. It's an HMO. The problem we have is that the current local plan doesn't give us the mechanisms to do anything about this in terms of percentage of HMOs, positioning of them, location and things like that. So I think the message to us as councillors is that we need a local plan that can do this. And it would be good if the good work that we did last year would be carried on by the current administration, who were not exactly on board with actually pushing through the local plan last year. So I'd really like that message going out to those councillors who are now not wanting this HMO to think about what they could have encouraged through earlier. So I can find no material reasons that we really can reject this. Parking is an issue, it is a loss of amenity, but it will be overrun in the appeal, I suggest. So I can find no strong enough material reasons, and yes, I would find myself voting for the approval.
Right, thanks for those comments. Any further debate, or can we just move to the vote? So we've got a mover and a seconder for approval. All those in favour, please show. Is that everybody's hand? Right. And those against, please show.
2.
Okay, any abstentions? That's it, is it? Okay, so that's approved. Oh, you abstained. Sorry, I didn't miss you there. Thanks for that, Callum. In that case, then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Ruth. Welcome, Ruth. Come into the hot seat.
Good evening, councillors. This application is being reported to Planning Committee because it has been called in by Councillor Hassel in accordance with the scheme of delegation. The application seeks retrospective planning consent for the construction of an all-weather outdoor menage with lighting, an equine stable block and access ramp, storage sheds, and a change from personal use to commercial use. Avondale is located within the open countryside, close to but not within the village boundary of Clifton upon Dunsmore. This slide shows the proximity of the application site to the Clifton on Dunsmore village boundary. The site is accessed from the north via a track off Station Road. This plan shows the layout of the site. The area highlighted in pink shows the extent of the previously approved equine stables under R210395. This application is stated as retrospective and is being submitted to regularised development, which has changed and now includes a stable block which is 6 metres longer than the approved scheme, the inclusion of the menage and the lighting, and a feed store, which is for the use of commercial livery business, retired equine, and this has been operating for approximately 2 years. Officer site visit photographs. On the left, we have a picture of the outdoor menage, and on the right, you can see the storage sheds here with the stable block rising behind here. Another view of the stable block from the outside with the ramped access. This is the inside area, and this shows the car parking area, which is to the south side of the stable block. Here we see the arrangement of the buildings and menage viewed from each side. It's advised that this drawing has been updated since the publication of the agenda to include a missing light column on the south elevation here. The menage has been structured to the standard size required for simple exercise. Whilst the footprint of the stable building is larger than the originally approved scheme, the overall heights are comparable. Both the existing and previously approved building have a ridge height circa 5 metres. This shows the access, a public footpath, and existing track within the site. The photograph is the gated entrance off Station Road. So key issues for this application are the principle of development, character and design, impact on neighbouring properties, impact on highways and access. The application site is located within the countryside, and policy GP2 states for developments within the countryside, new development will be resisted, but only where national policy on countryside locations allows will development be permitted. The application site is located within the parish boundary of Clifton upon Dunsmore, but not within the village boundary. However, as the development will be within the curtilage of an already developed site, the proposals are acceptable and considered to comply with policy GP2 of the local plan. Paragraph 88 of the National Planning Policy Framework states that policies and decisions should support and enable the development and diversification of rural businesses. Subject to the proposed scheme complying with national and local policies, the principle of development is considered acceptable. The site's character is very rural, and the design of the stable and feed store are considered to be commensurate with this character. There is no increase to the height, and the additional size is mitigated by the building being tucked into the corner of the field, which is already enclosed by post rail timber fencing that lends it a very paddock-like appearance. There is good separation distance with residential properties. In terms of the impact of the menage lighting upon the residential amenity, the closest residential house is over 160 metres away, and this separation helps keep potential impacts to an acceptable level. Conditions restrict the hours of use from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for the commercial use and the menage lighting. There are no concerns in regard to loss of light or privacy. The main concerns have been in regard to the access and highways. The application is retrospective, and the business has been operational for approximately 2 years. Highways have requested conditions which include the provision of a turning area within the site. This will enable vehicles to then turn around and leave in a forward-facing position. And these conditions will be required to be complied with within 90 days of any approval granted. The timeframes have been put on because of the retrospective nature of the application. The current use of Station Road includes the use of the road by the business already because of the retrospective nature of this application, and subject to the conditions, highways have not objected. Conditions will be applied to the use to keep it as livery only and prevent a further escalation of the use of the site for wider equestrian activities. So in the planning balance, the application supports the rural economy, and the use of the stables for a livery business is a recognised diversification of a land-based rural business. As such, it's supported by local and national policies, which gives weight to the application. The proposed scheme represents a development that is sympathetic to its surroundings and the rural character of the locality. The concerns raised relating to highways and traffic have been assessed, and highways have no concerns subject to the conditions. The recommendation is to approve, subject to the conditions set out in the report, and the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment be given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the conditions and informatives outlined in the draft decision notice.
Councillor Lawrence.
I can see quite a few restrictions on the business in terms of operating hours, lighting and things like that. The problem with these we've seen about other sites of this nature in the past is they may actually cease to go in business, and then there's a security issue. Can you tell me what level of security there is actually on this property?
Through you, Chair. So the gated access at the top is kept locked, and the use and arrival of people to and from the site is by appointment with the proprietor. It's also separated off from the canal arm. The proprietor for this site also owns Clifton Cruises and operates that. So as I said in the report, this is a diversification for business.
Can we, I don't know, there is, as in the report it says, there is a boundary fence. It's very easy to create an access way through a boundary fence. Is it something we could condition, that boundary cannot be opened up at any point in the future?
Okay, we're still on points of clarification. Okay, is that right? Okay, do you want to respond to that?
I'm asking whether that is a possibility, not in debate yet.
Yes, we can look at that. We can look at adding that.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. My concerns are conditions 7 and 8, as this is going to be used as a commercial premises. One of the concerns I have is leachate from animal waste into any potential watercourse, stream or river or canal, and that negative impact that has on those watercourses. And will we be asking Environmental Health to put strong conditions to ensure leachate does not end up in any watercourse?
Through you, Chair. I'm just going to go back to the slide where it shows the location of, here we are, the manure heap is here. So it's to the east of the block and the feed store. The condition 7 in regards to a scheme for the containment and storage of manure was requested by Environmental Health, as well as, the fly management plan. So they've got to submit that in writing, and that will be assessed in accordance with best practice for stable management and what is required, and Environmental Health will be consulted on the scheme when it's put in.
From what I've seen myself, normally it's a concrete base with a block wall around 3 sides, so it could be accessed down one side to dump it in and take it out. So it's all contained in an area. Yeah. Any further points of clarification, or can we move on to the debate? Let's move to the debate then. Councillor Sanderson, were you going to jump in there?
Yeah. Subject to the conditions being met and the informatives and a good report from Environmental Health, I'm happy to support the moving of the recommendation.
Councillor Maudis.
Sorry, can I just clarify something? Because there was a comment obviously raised by another councillor about looking at no access through the boundary fence that's been put up. When you talk about all the conditions, does that include that condition, or is it as the conditions laid out in the agenda?
I'd left that to debate.
Okay.
We've got Councillor Maudis next, and then Councillor Lawrence.
I was just going to second Councillor Sanderson, subject to Councillor Lawrence's condition, please.
When we hear what it is.
I think it's to no access through, yeah.
Councillor Lawrence.
I am minded to approve, given the addition of the condition, which is to apply some restrictions on the boundary between the two properties as they're co-owned, so that there is some security between them. I would leave the wording to the officers to choose.
Okay, have we got any further speakers, or can we move to the vote? So we've got a proposer and a seconder for approval. All those in favour with the addition of the amendment to the condition, and which Ruth has taken on board. All those in favour, please show. Is that a unanimous one? Oh, fantastic! Well done. Thank you. So that's approved. We're now moving on to Adam at Toft Edge in Dunchurch.
Good evening. This is application R24-0115 at Toft Edge upon Southern Road within Dunchurch. This application is for a proposed rear extension and a detached garage. The application has been submitted by a member of staff at Rugby Council and is therefore in accordance with paragraph 5.2.3. The application dwelling is a three-storey detached dwelling which is of a modern and contemporary design, which is one of the focal points upon entrance into the village of Dunchurch. The application dwelling sits upon land of differing heights, with the rear of the property being situated lower than to the front. To the south of the dwelling is the M45 motorway, which sits several metres below the ground level of the site. Some photos. The proposed garage will be situated to the east of the dwelling, approximately 0.9 metres from the neighbouring boundary to Toft Monks. The garage would measure 2.63 metres in height, have a length of 7.83 metres and a width of 3.3 metres. There will be matching materials to the existing property, along with a mono-pitched roof to match the existing dwelling. The proposed rear extension will see the removal of the existing rear balcony, which will have a maximum height of 2.85 metres, a width of 10.9 metres, and a projection off the rear elevation of 2.75 metres. Similarly to the proposed garage, the rear extension would have a mono-pitch roof with similar materials to the existing dwelling. A balcony is proposed at second floor level, 4.5 metres above ground level upon the western elevation. The balcony will be 3.35 metres in width, 1.1 metres in height, and have a projection off the western elevation of 2.55 metres. Another balcony is proposed at first floor level, which would be 1.2 metres above ground level. It would have a height of 1.06 metres, a width of 1.96 metres, and a projection of 2.55 metres off the western elevation. I'm not sure you can see that, but that would be the proposed front elevation of the garage, and then this highlights the distance between the neighbouring boundary, which would be 0.9 metres. And then I'm not too sure if you can see the proposed site plan, but on this side you can see the mouse. That's where the proposed garage would be, the rear extension was to the rear, and then the proposed balconies on the western elevation. And the proposed rear elevation obviously shows the rear extension. The proposed east elevation shows where the garage would be situated, along with the new extension to the rear, and that kind of shows the gradual level drop from the front to the rear. And upon the western elevation, you can see the two balconies, one at second floor level and one at first floor level. There were no consultation responses required, and there were no objections from councillors in the Dunchurch parish. Key considerations of this is the principle of development. The application site is located in Dunchurch, a main rural settlement as defined in the local plan policy GP2. Therefore, as such, development will be permitted, providing all planning matters are appropriately addressed. The application is considered to be in accordance with policy GP2 of the local plan, providing all other material planning considerations are considered acceptable. It was considered with the rear extension, it was subservient to the main dwelling, whilst also incorporating a similar roof type. Being situated again to the rear, it's considered that the extension would not have a detrimental impact on the visual amenity of the street scene. The proposed garage is also single storey and is also subservient. The materials used in construction would match the main dwelling. Whilst the majority of the garage will be situated to the rear of the property, part of the roof will protrude past the front. The protrusion is considered minimal and has a similar appearance in terms of roof types to the main dwelling, which would provide a visual interest. The proposed balconies are glazed and will be located upon the western elevation. The boundary towards the M45, which the balconies would face, is well screened by trees and shrubbery, and the property already maintains balconies and glazed features, and therefore these will provide additional character to the dwelling. In this instance, the proposal is considered to comply with policy STC1. The impact on residential amenity. The level drop from top amongst the application dwelling would mean there is a negligible loss of light to the window at the ground floor due to, as a result of the proposed garage. With the garage not extending beyond the rear of the property, this would mean there is no breach in terms of the 45-degree line due to what is already existing. The proposed balconies to the west of the application dwelling would face towards the M45. The closest property which we'll be able to see this is Ellersmere, which is located across Southern Road and approximately 45 metres from the proposed balcony. From this application is considered to coincide with policy SDC1 and would not have an adverse impact on any neighbouring properties above those that would usually be experienced. Consider that the proposal would respect the scale and character of the surrounding area. It would not adversely affect the amenities of the occupiers of neighbouring properties, and consider the application is to be in accordance with both the MPPF and the local plan. So it is recommended that planning application R240015 be approved subject to the conditions and informatives set out in the draft decision notice, and the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment be given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the conditions and outlines in the draft decision notice. Thank you.
Any points of clarification to the officer? Or can we move straight on into the debate? Let's move straight on into the debate. Yes. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is certainly a unique building, to say the least. In fact, somebody will probably list it sometime in the distant future. But it's again, its locality is not going to impact upon any other dwelling. I'm sure it'll look lovely from the motorway. But obviously it's been brought to committee because there is an officer of the council involved. But it seems a straightforward application. There's nothing untoward, and the new balcony will, I think, fit in well with the building. So, Chair, I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you to the officer for the report. Good, clear report. Absolutely, I would, for the same reasons, would want us swiftly to move to approval of this as set out on the conditions in the report.
Okay, if we've got no further speakers, then we'll... Councillor Bowdis.
Sorry, just to say for transparency, I work for Dunchurch Parish Council, so I believe it would be a non-pecuniary, but they didn't object. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, in that case, we've got no more speakers. We've got the proposer and a seconder for approval. All those in favour, please show. That looks like another unanimous one. My golly, this is getting better. Thank you for that, Adam. Thank you. So that is approved.
Apologies, there was a few technical issues with my first presentation, so I'm just making sure this one is all sorted, but yeah, it looks okay. This is application R240116 at Martin Moore House. The application proposal is for the erection of an outbuildings, a stables buildings, and a change of use of the land from residential to equestrian purposes. As you can see on the left, the red line around this area here is the area that's proposed to change the use. And on the plan on the right, it shows the location of the proposed stables and the proposed outbuilding as well. So this application is being reported to Planning Committee as the agent acting on behalf of the applicant is a current officer of the council. So in terms of site location and characteristics, Martin Moore House is located south of the village of Martin and wholly within the Greenbelt. The applicant owns a total of 23 hectares of land in the area, including the agricultural fields surrounding his residential property. The application site, as you saw with the red line boundary in the previous slide, totals an area of circle 0.2 hectares and is currently within an area classified as his residential curtilage. The application site is located between the dwelling and the southern boundary. As I mentioned, the site is also adjoined by agricultural fields on all sides. At the moment, there are existing temporary buildings serving as accommodation for the applicant's horses and his current associated agricultural equipment, which he uses to maintain the surrounding fields to his property. So in terms of the site photo, on the left, you can see with the red laser here, that is a residential property. The area to change the use is just here, and the proposed stables will be located here, along with the proposed outbuilding, which will be used for agricultural storage as well. Photo here, we've got the main residential property. On the right, we've got the existing temporary stables, which the applicant has, which he uses to hold his horses. He owns a total of 3. The photo down here shows his existing agricultural equipment, and then on the right are the another existing temporary outbuilding as well, which he uses to store some of his equipment. So the proposal, as I mentioned, is for the erection of an outbuilding and a stables block, along with a change of use of the parcel of land to equestrian purposes. The stables building, which is proposed, will contain a length of 14.4 metres and a total height of 3.5 metres. The appearance of this stable block will be timber clad, and it will carry a typical stable design. And internally, the stables building will comprise of 3 stalls and 1 tack room. With regards to the proposed agricultural outbuilding, this is slightly larger and has a total length of 18 metres to a width of just over 12 metres and an overall height of just over 5 metres, and will be used to store the applicant's existing agricultural machinery and equine machinery, which he uses to maintain his land. And the front elevation, as you'll see on the next slide, will contain a roller shutter. So on the top left, we have a fairly basic image of what the proposed stables will look like. As I mentioned, it will comprise of timber cladding. On the right, we have the proposed agricultural outbuilding. As you can see, it carries a typical appearance of an agricultural unit. It will comprise of steel cladding as well. So in terms of the consultation responses received for this, National Gas Transmission offered no objection. The reason they were consulted was because there was a high pressure pipeline in close proximity to the site. However, as I said, they offered a no objection. National Grid, the same, no objection. Warwickshire County Council Ecology offered no objection subject to a condition. And Warwickshire County Council Rights of Way offered a no objection as well. The reason they were consulted, obviously, was because there is a public right-of-way in close proximity to the site, but the proposal structures will not impact them in any way. Neighbours and ward councillors were notified along with Martin Parish Council. A site notice was also posted and no third-party comments were received. So in terms of the principle of development, as I mentioned, the site is located in the Greenbelt. As such, policy GPT of the local plan states that development will be allocated and is supported in accordance with the settlement hierarchy. As the site is located in the Greenbelt, as such, new development will usually be resisted. Only where national policy allows will development be permitted. Paragraph 153 states that when considering any planning application, a local planning authority should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the Greenbelt. Paragraph 154 and 155 outline a list of exceptions whereby Greenbelt development can be considered acceptable. In this case, paragraph 154B is applicable. This paragraph states that the provision of appropriate facilities in connection with the existing use of the land or the change of use is acceptable as long as the facilities preserve the openness of the Greenbelt and do not conflict with the purposes of including land within it. So in terms of the justification for the principle, as I mentioned, the applicant's equipment and machinery is to be stored in the outbuilding with the agricultural appearance. This is in association with the keeping of the applicant's horses and the overall maintenance of the surrounding agricultural fields. The proposed outbuilding along with the stable block are both considered necessary to support the proposed and existing use of the applicant's land. Both structures are also considered to carry an appropriate appearance for a rural location as well. Therefore, the proposed developments, along with the proposed change of use of land, are applicable under paragraph 154B of the framework. The harm inflicted on the Greenbelt's openness as a result, however, must be assessed and weighted accordingly. The additional bulk and volume resulting from the single-storey structures will have a limited impact on the surrounding openness. Neither structure will be prominently viewed from the front of the property due to the screening resulting from the existing built form. Fencing and foliage will be viewed in association with the existing built form and will block any view from the public domain from the front of the property. As I mentioned, there are existing structures as well through a temporary stable block and a small temporary sort of agricultural shed as well, which are accommodating the applicant's needs currently, and they will be removed to make way for this proposal. The proposed structures also appear subordinate to the main dwelling as well. Therefore, the proposal is considered appropriate within the Greenbelt and is in accordance with paragraph 154B of the framework and local plan policy GP2 as a result. So in terms of the character and design, as I touched on previously, the stables building will have a clear equine appearance comprising of a 4-bay arrangement and will be made up of timber cladding with a shallow pitch roof. The outbuilding has also been designed to resemble an agricultural barn comprising of steel sheeting. These structures will be viewed in association with the existing dwelling and outbuildings and would appear in connection with the proposed and surrounding agricultural land use. The proposal also uses suitable materials throughout, and the size and nature is also considered appropriate to the locality. Therefore, on this basis, the proposal is considered to be in accordance with Local Plan Policy SDC1 and Section 12 of the NPPF. In terms of the impact on neighbouring amenity, due to the nature of the development by way of its appropriate size and location away from neighbouring properties, the proposal will have no impact on the amenity of the surrounding area, as the application site is set back over 150 metres from the nearest neighbouring dwelling. In addition to this, appropriate conditions have also been added to the draft decision notice in the event of approval, which will reduce any additional lighting resulting from the change of use, any noise pollution, and no burning of waste relating to the proposal can occur on site unless further permission is granted by the local authority. So, other matters, the proposal poses no impact on the current access or parking situation on site as it is a private use. The County Ecology team will also consult on the application and provided a stance of no objection, subject to a condition. This includes a landscape management plan which will have to be provided to the local authority prior to the work commencing, which will ensure that there's an adequate net gain provided on site for biodiversity. Therefore, the application is considered in accordance with Local Plan Policy NE1. As I mentioned, the application site is located close to a high gas pipeline. As a result, National Gas were consulted and provided no objection, however, did provide informatives attached to any decision notice. So, in terms of the planning balance and conclusion, as I've detailed, the proposal complies with paragraph 154B of the NPPF, which outlines that the provision of appropriate facilities in connection with the existing use of land or a change of use are considered acceptable. The bulk and volume resulting from the single-storey structures will not impact on the openness of the Greenbelt, which warrants a refusal on this aspect. The proposed would also be viewed in association with the existing dwelling and outbuildings and would appear subordinate. The structures would occupy a very small area of considerable grounds, are considered to show a design appropriate to this rural location. There are no anticipated detrimental impacts on highways, parking or biodiversity. Therefore, the officer recommendation is that planning application R24-0116 be approved, subject to the conditions and informatives set out in the draft decision notice, and the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment be given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the conditions and informatives outlined in the draft decision notice. Thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
Yes. This is for the applicant's own use.
Through you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. Sorry.
Should the applicant look to use it for a commercial use in the future, a fresh application would have to be submitted. Am I correct?
Through you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. If you bear with me 1 second, I'll get the draft decision notice up. There was a condition included which limited it to private use only. So yes, any change to this to commercial use would require a separate application.
Thank you.
And highways considerations is obviously as well.
Councillor Lawrence.
Again, just for clarification, The bungalow was actually a stable building beforehand, I believe. So they have taken away a stabling building to make it into a residential property, to build a stabling block, which they could then, by the precedent already set, they could straight into the residential building, surely. Therefore, just want to understand the conditioning to stop this urbanisation of the site continuing.
I've got a feeling you're reading between the lines here. Perhaps our legal officer might just chip in and just give us some words of wisdom.
Yeah, are you asking whether it could change back to a residence without planning permission?
I'm just raising that as clarification for the conversation, yes.
Yeah, no, it would need a new application, a new consent.
Okay, so let's move on to the debate. No more points of clarification. Let's move on to the debate. Have we got any speakers? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. With those 2 points of clarification, I'm happy to move the recommendation as printed.
And then Councillor Lawrence.
And I would second that as the condition set. And let's go.
Have we got any further speakers? So we're all happy with that then. So we've got a proposer and a seconder for approval with the conditions as stated. All those in favour, please show. Well, that's unanimous again. That's 3 out of 3. Thanks for that, Sam. That's very good of you. Thank you. And then we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is advance notice of site visits.
Through you, Chair, I've had no further ones.
Next item, delegated decisions.
Noted.
Well, I've got to say that you've all been very, very well behaved tonight, and I can't help but think this could well be the calm before the storm. So thank you all. So that does conclude the meeting for this evening. Thank you all, and thank you to two Lucy's. Thanks to Claire and thanks to Richard and all the officers. Thank you.